She gave up meals for books. The millionaire CEO's unexpected decision changed everything. Emily stared at the bright white grounds of Wellington University, feeling like an imposter in a place where her dreams seemed both tantalizingly close and utterly out of reach. The echoing laughter of students clad in designer clothes cut through her like icy wind. She rubbed her temples, trying to quell the voices of doubt that crept in, alongside the hunger gnawing at her stomach. The memory of her packed textbooks and craving for knowledge, stacked high beside empty bowls, felt like an eternity ago. Every late-night study session had come at a cost, her meals. But starvation had become a familiar companion, fueling her resolve to escape her small-town life. This is what she worked for, isn't it? Yet here, among the elite, Emily had never felt more vulnerable. A scholarship, they said. She was lucky. The whispers behind her back beckoned to the unwanted truth. She didn't belong. She brushed the back of her hand over her brow, a desperate attempt to wipe away the perspiration of anxiety. What if her voice faltered in this boardroom? What if she was judged not just by her ideas, but by her past? A sharp gasp escaped her lips as she stepped inside the corporate tower for her internship with Mark Reynolds, the billionaire CEO known for his hard-nosed business tactics. Her heart raced as she watched him stride past, head held high, an air of authority surrounding him like an impenetrable cloak. She couldn't afford missteps. This chance didn't just represent her future, it was a lifeline for her mother, who had locked her dreams away after tragedy struck. Would Emily's aspirations breathe life back into her spirit, or was she merely feeding an irresistible hunger? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Emily's thoughts spiraled as she prepped for a presentation on community outreach. She felt nauseous, envisioning the boardroom where men and women in tailored suits would scrutinize her every word. The stakes grew higher with each passing moment. She clenched her fists, imagining standing before them, the voice inside her screaming, "What if they laughed? What if they dismissed her?" The fear of being associated with the underdog played like a broken record in her mind, fueling a deep-seated vulnerability. As the presentation day drew near, each sleepless night swallowed with self-doubt further eroded her confidence. Every judgmental glance she caught felt like a tiny furrow on her brow, deepening her resolve to fight for the changes she envisioned. If only she could be as decisive as Mark, who dominated board meetings with polished rationality. But with each confrontation, she wrestled between the desire for recognition and the fear of sacrificing her authenticity. The atmosphere crackled with tension on the day of the board meeting. The room felt like a pressure cooker, her ideas hanging precariously in the balance. Would she maintain her voice, honor her values, or allow her aspirations to drown in the flood of corporate indifference? Mark looked her way, interest flickering briefly in his eyes, sending a jolt of mingled hope and dread through her. As the board began their counter-arguments, Emily's heart lurched. Time stood still, and the impending showdown loomed like a storm cloud. Would his unexpected decision change everything, or would it fade into the shadows like so many of her dreams? Emily squared her shoulders, focusing on the flickering lights of the boardroom. The tension thickened with every word exchanged, the weight of her ideas like stones in her pocket. Mark's presence loomed larger as he sat back, listening intently. Desire and anxiety battled within her, delicate threads of hope weaving through her clenched fists. She could not crumble now. She had come too far. As she rose to present, a flurry of doubts surged forward. She cleared her throat, her voice surprisingly steady. The initial rush transformed into a steady cadence as she outlined her vision for community outreach. She spoke passionately about integrating business strategy with social responsibility, emphasizing genuine partnerships over mere donations. Words flowed, each sentence a plea for connection, not just profit. The board responded with market-centric arguments, questioning the financial viability of her proposals. Their skepticism was palpable, but as she engaged, she sensed the shift in herself. She stopped seeking their approval and instead began advocating for her ideas as intrinsic to their corporate identity. Investing in the community is investing in the future of this company, she stated, eyes locked fiercely with the senior executive who tossed the most criticism her way. She struggled to push through the dismissal that had initially clouded her mind. She had seen how few afforded the luxury of an elite education. They needed that outreach too. With each response, she felt the shackles of her insecurity loosen. Even when Mark leaned in, curiosity illuminating his steady gaze, she fought the urge to deflate. Was he truly interested, or was he merely observing the fallout? Deep breaths steadied her focus, and she realized her time was now, not just for her dreams, but for everyone who had believed in her. Quiet murmurs broke out when she finished, and after what felt like an eternity, Mark spoke. Emily raises an interesting point. This isn't just about profit margins, it's about sustainability. Her heart raced. Could he turn the tide in her favor? But the challenge didn't end there. With calculated precision, he laid out the numbers, countering her vision with the cold realities of economic returns. Emily's pulse quickened. She couldn't let this moment slip away. Mark, every figure you analyze needs a heart, she countered, her voice firm but respectful, reaching towards the fire of conviction that had ignited in her. A hush fell over the room as she observed their reactions, some nodding, others surprised, and even a few intrigued. She wasn't just fighting for her ideas, she was fighting to prove that vision could coexist with pragmatism. After the meeting, Mark approached her. "You held your ground well," he said, a flicker of respect evident. "But this is just the beginning. We'll need to refine your plan." The weight of those words was like both a release and a burden. Refinement meant more challenges, and her sense of triumph began to wane under the immense pressure. And then, as she emerged from the boardroom, a startling revelation struck her. Parking her striving ambition amidst the board's expectations wasn't truly authentic. They needed her fresh perspective just as much as she needed their validation. The hunger inside her grew, driving her towards pivoting her framework of success, no longer defined by traditional markers of approval, but by a deeper commitment to her identity and values. In that moment, an unsettling proposition hung in the air. Was she willing to risk it all, to break free from the confines of expectation and carve increasingly radical paths for not only her career, but for the future of the company? As her mind churned with possibilities, she knew she was at a precipice. The time had come to face not only the board, but her own conflicting desires, the need for security and the yearning for impact. Would she navigate the storm ahead, or would she retreat into the shadows of what was comfortable? Determined, she left the boardroom, confident yet restless, ready to confront her emerging ambitions. But what if the very change she sought put her in the crosshairs of a corporate conflict she couldn't escape? Emily wandered the corridors of the office, her mind a tempest of thoughts. The boardroom confrontation had disrupted her carefully structured worldview. As she passed the glass conference rooms, a nagging fear bubbled up inside her. What if she couldn't deliver? The gravity of what Mark had said about refinement loomed large, and confusion twisted in her stomach. The path forward required more than just verbal battles. It demanded actionable strategies that aligned with her vision of social responsibility. Determined not to back down, Emily decided to spend time unraveling her thoughts into a solid plan. She found her way to a small coffee shop nearby, a frequent haunt where the hum of conversation and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee often helped her focus. Settling into a booth, she pulled out her laptop and started to outline objectives for her community outreach program. Ideas flowed freely at first. Partnerships with local nonprofits, skill-building workshops, and engagement events that encouraged employee participation. She imagined the ripple effect these initiatives could create, not merely for their profit margins, but for the entire fabric of the community at large. But as each bullet point formed, doubt resurfaced. What if the proposals felt too radical for the company's culture? What if the board dismissed her ideas again? Frustration surged within her, and she paused to sip her coffee, letting the warmth seep into her hands. Authenticity first, she whispered to herself, drawing on her earlier resolution. She recalled the audience's reactions in the boardroom, the surprise, intrigue, and even grudging respect. That spark ignited the fire within her. Emily began typing with renewed vigor, weaving her personal experiences into her proposal. She framed her own journey, the sacrifices and struggles that had forged her commitment to weave social responsibility into the corporation's core. Hours slipped by as she immersed herself in her laptop's glow, each new word a stroke of rebellion against the status quo. The more she wrote, the more confident she became. Her approach wasn't merely about financial gain, it was a call to arms for her colleagues to unite behind a cause that resonated beyond profits. Later that evening, while reviewing her draft, she stumbled upon a realization that both exhilarated and terrified her. She needed to confront the board with more than just a proposal. She had to offer them a new lens through which to view success, one that could disrupt their conventional metrics. To articulate this shift, she had to draw on the data Mark shared, blending it seamlessly with her vision of social good. As the thought process deepened, the realization of her impending confrontation with Mark settled upon her like a dark cloud. She was more aware than before that successful execution of her ideas was a dual-edged sword. Would she be able to uphold her vision against his more conventional perspective? Would the board embrace her revolution, or would she find herself at the brink of dismissal once more? Pushing aside the lingering dread, Emily focused on preparing for their upcoming meetings, knowing she would need every ounce of resolve she possessed. The stakes were monumental, not just for her career, but for the idealistic changes she yearned to ignite within the company. With her laptop closed and plans outlined in her head, a familiar unease crept in. Did she truly possess the fortitude to challenge Mark and the board again? Could she hold on to her integrity and push for significant change, or was she destined to adapt and dilute her vision to fit their expectations? As doubts clawed at her determination, she prepared to enter a battle of wits, a duel of ideologies. What lay ahead was a confrontation unlike any other, one that would ultimately test not only her professional acumen, but her very identity. The next confrontation was simmering just below the surface, whispering of changes yet to come. Would she finally harness the courage to break down the barriers in her path, or would she find her dreams entangled in the web of corporate expectations? The morning light poured through her apartment window, casting a warm glow that felt almost comforting given her internal turmoil. Emily paced in her living room, rehearsing her talking points in front of an oversized mirror. Each word dripped with her determination, yet the reflection staring back was a mixture of confidence and anxiety. She had the ambition to shatter the glass ceiling of conventional thought, but self-doubt loomed ominously, willing her to second-guess her vision once more. Today marked the day she would present her refined proposal to the board, an opportunity to command respect through clear, actionable strategies rather than passive suggestions. She had taken countless notes, refining her arguments and aligning them with the company's recent socioeconomic metrics. However, Mark's critique still echoed in her mind, fueling both her anxiety and her resolve. At the office, Emily mapped her way through the layout of the conference room, mentally preparing for the barrage of scrutiny. Stepping inside, she noticed the board members gathering, their expressions a blend of anticipation and skepticism. Mark caught her eye first. There was a predatory glint in his gaze, an unwelcome reminder of his earlier dismissals. "Emily, are you ready?" he asked, his tone teetering between casual and condescending. "Ready as I'll ever be," she replied, injecting subtle defiance into her voice. If today was to be a battleground, she refused to appear weak. As she laid out her presentation, she began with the familiar data points, charts, and figures that hinted at potential profit. But this time, she allowed her authenticity to seep through the statistics. Each reflection on her own journey, each challenge she had faced, underscored the necessity of embracing social responsibility and reforming their corporate approach. The board listened intently, though Emily could sense their skepticism. "Interesting ideas, Emily," Mark interjected as she concluded. "But are we really going to pivot our entire strategy based on emotional appeal? Business is about results." That comment wrapped around her like a choking vine. He was dismissing her passion as mere sentimentality, trivializing the very causes she believed in deeply. Emily fought to keep her face steady and poised, pushing her irritation aside. "Results are often rooted in perception, Mark," she shot back, her voice gaining an edge. "By integrating social responsibility, we not only enhance our brand's image, but also engage our employees. Team morale translates to productivity, which ultimately drives profits. This is about recognizing the evolution of our audience. It's not an emotional appeal, it's a strategic necessity." The room buzzed with murmurs, some in agreement, others still wrestling with the idea. There was no turning back now. She had to commit fully, risking rigid acceptances of her ideas. As the meeting wore on, Emily's noteworthy suggestions sparked debates among board members. Some seemed intrigued, leaning toward her vision, while Mark countered every point with a stronghold of traditional perspectives. Hours felt like days as the discussion dragged into dynamics of finances versus ideals. Each time someone leaned towards her vision, a part of Emily ignited with hope. Yet with every rebuttal from Mark, shadows threatened to dim her resolve. She navigated the conversations with agility, revealing her newfound proficiency in strategic argumentation, planting seeds of change within the rigid confines of corporate expectations. Finally, as the room emptied and board members trickled out, a lingering unease cut through the air. Facing Mark one last time, she saw that her challenge had only just begun. "Don't think you've won yet," he murmured softly, a brain-teasing hint lurking behind his sharp eyes. Emily straightened, adrenaline surging as she absorbed his words. She had awakened something more significant than she realized, and her confrontation felt like the first domino in a much larger chain reaction. Determined to redefine success, she understood now that challenging convention demanded not just acumen, but resilience. She would need to build alliances where she could, gathering support to fortify her initiatives. As she stepped out of the conference room, Emily's heart raced with uncharted territories waiting to be explored. What strategies would she adopt next to bolster her vision? And would Mark become a formidable foe, or might he be swayed to her cause in the looming encounters ahead? Emily took a deep breath, ready to brace herself for the next wave of challenges. Days passed as Emily navigated the aftermath of her presentation, the tension with Mark weighing heavily in the corners of her mind. Each time she crossed paths with him in the office, a taut string seemed to snap tighter, threatening to unravel her resolve. Yet, amidst uncertainty, she felt a flickering determination take root, stronger than before. In the quiet evenings, she began to analyze the dynamics of power within her company, identifying allies and opponents. With time, she made a strategic decision to reach out to colleagues who might support her vision. She knew that to confront Mark effectively, she needed a coalition that reinforced her ideas. The first person she approached was Sarah, a mid-level manager known for her insightful approach to employee engagement. As they met over coffee in a bustling cafe, Emily outlined her proposal and vision. "You're not just selling an idea, you're igniting a conversation," Sarah observed, her eyes glinting with enthusiasm. "People want to feel empowered. If we show them our approach creates a tangible impact, they'll rally behind it." Encouraged by the feedback, Emily invited a few more colleagues to discuss their collective experiences with corporate responsibility and employee satisfaction. Each conversation contributed to a growing sense of momentum, a shift in perspective that she began to observe in the office atmosphere. This newfound sense of community amongst her peers injected Emily with a strength she had previously underestimated. However, Mark's presence loomed larger as her approach gained traction. He was astute, often glancing curiously at the round-table discussions taking place in the break room. His piercing gaze felt like an unspoken challenge, as if he were mapping her every move. One afternoon, as Emily and her supporters drafted new strategies, they were interrupted when Mark strolled in nonchalantly, offering himself as an unexpected witness to their brainstorming session. "Hope you're not all just plotting your little dreams here," he quipped, a smirk dancing on his lips. Emily felt a rush of adrenaline. "Only if they lead to actionable results, Mark." His brow arched at her reply, clearly taken aback by her confidence. "Let's not forget who makes decisions around here," he shot back, yet something in his voice hinted he was unsettled by her growing conviction. This was more than office rivalry. It was a battle for the company's future. The exchange deepened Emily's determination. She shifted her focus to refining her proposal further, recognizing the significance of not just winning a battle, but constructing a foundation strong enough to withstand future scrutiny. That week, she decided to introduce metrics to bolster her arguments. By delving deeper into case studies of companies who embrace social responsibility, Emily crafted a more comprehensive strategy that underscored the financial implications of employee well-being. Her aim was clear: transform empathy into profit. With her coalition behind her, she prepared for a follow-up meeting, feeling a storm of anticipation mixed with trepidation. In her gut, she sensed that Mark would not take her initiative lightly and that he would challenge her with every fiber of his being. As the meeting approached, Emily wrestled with anxiety and adrenaline. Was she prepared to face him again? Would her colleagues remain aligned and support her when the stakes rose? The internal dialogue played out in her mind, revealing her desire not just to prevail, but to redefine what success looked like in their corporate environment. The very night before the meeting, insomnia visited her again. As she lay awake, she grasped at the larger implications of her actions, recognizing that her trajectory was about more than mere metrics. It was a transformation of identity. The next morning, she arrived at the office, armed with her revised proposal and a set of specific goals. Mark awaited her, the image of calm confidence, yet Emily sensed deeper layers of tension simmering beneath. Before she could gather her thoughts, the board convened, and she prepared to present once again, this time with renewed resolve. The moment held weight, and she knew this was her opportunity to not only claim her narrative, but challenge the very framework under which they operated. She took a breath, ready to confront whatever Mark would throw her way, aware that the true battle was unfolding not only outside, but also within herself. The time had come for a decisive showdown. Would she finally emerge victorious, or would Mark manage to thwart her ambitions yet again? The stakes had never been higher. With heart racing, Emily stood at the forefront of the conference room, her colleagues seated before her, eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and support. This was it, her moment to pivot. As she glanced across the table, Mark settled back in his chair, his expression unreadable, yet there was an intensity in his gaze that left no doubt he was a predator watching his prey. "Thank you all for being here today," Emily began, her voice steadying as she fought back the surge of vulnerability swelling inside her. "I want to talk about employee engagement and social responsibility, not just as buzzwords, but as a cornerstone for our collective future at this company." She cleared her throat, feeling the weight of their expectations. Her presentation unfolded with focused clarity, highlighting the potential benefits of her approach. She interwove statistics and narratives, painting a vivid picture of how investments in employee welfare could enhance productivity and drive profits. Each slide transitioned smoothly, but Emily could sense Mark's skepticism filling the space around her. "Interesting points, Emily," Mark interjected, his tone dripping with condescension. "Yet, what is your evidence? How do we know these initiatives will yield results when our numbers have been stable without them?" He leaned forward, his confidence an unsettling shadow casting doubt across the room. Taking a deep breath, Emily felt the flicker of self-doubt. She had anticipated such challenges, Yet hearing them voiced still cut deeper than she wished. "That's the point, Mark," she replied, finding her voice rising in conviction. "Stability doesn't mean we are thriving. It simply means we are maintaining the status quo. Innovative companies have shown that prioritizing employee well-being often translates to reduced turnover and elevated morale, leading to increased innovation and resilience in the marketplace." Mark smirked, his demeanor unfazed. "But how do you propose we fund these initiatives? Corporate strategy needs to consider short-term earnings." Emily could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, the knot in her stomach tightening. This was not merely an academic discussion. It was a pivotal clash of ideologies. She fought to maintain her composure. "Investing in our people is a long-term strategy that pays dividends beyond mere financials, Mark. It creates a culture that attracts and retains top talent. I'm not proposing luxury. I'm offering a sustainable path." With each passing moment, the confrontation sharpened. Emily's heart pounded, a mixture of fear and fiery resolve. The environment bristled with unspoken tension, her colleagues' eyes darting between her and Mark, weighing allegiances and potential outcomes. "Emily, I respect your passion, but without concrete figures and a solid plan, we risk losing our investors' trust," Mark pressed, his brow furrowing, revealing an underlying intensity she hadn't seen before. "Perhaps that's where we differ, Mark," she countered, leaning in slightly, emboldened by the shared camaraderie of supportive nods from her colleagues. "I see risk and opportunity as two sides of the same coin. A willingness to invest in our most fundamental asset, our people, is not a gamble. It's a guarantee of our adaptability in a volatile market." In the midst of the heated exchange, clarity dawned upon Emily, a revelation about her own motivations. More than just pushing back against Mark, she wanted to shape an environment that resonated with her values. She wasn't merely protecting her proposal, she was carving out a new identity for herself in this space. Mark's expression shifted, just slightly, recognition of her resolve piercing through his dismissal. The meeting continued, though Emily felt a renewed strength with each word spoken, bolstered by her allies around her. As the session wrapped up, Emily caught just a glimpse of uncertainty ghosting Mark's features, compelling evidence of her growing influence. The undertones of their battle laced with unyielding tension. In the hallway afterward, Sarah approached Emily, her expression one of admiration. "That was brave. You really held your ground." "I felt different this time," Emily admitted, contemplating her newfound clarity. "It's more than just ideas, it's who I am becoming in this process." But even with momentum on her side, Emily sensed the deeper implications of their power struggle. She couldn't shake the feeling that Mark wasn't finished. As she prepared to head home, her mind tingled with questions. Would her resolve withstand his next move? How far was Mark willing to go to uphold the status quo? Emily walked away, heavy with the knowledge that the most arduous phase of this battle had only just begun. The stakes were of personal significance now, entangled not only in professional ambitions, but also in the very essence of who she was becoming. What new strategic decisions would she have to make when Mark retaliated? The path ahead loomed uncertain, and the echoes of their rivalry had only just begun to ripple through her career. The next day dawned crisp and bright, but Emily felt the weight of the previous day's confrontation still pressing upon her. While the sunlight streamed through her apartment window, illuminating the chaos of her desk, scattered papers, coffee mugs, and half-finished projects, her mind fixated on the looming challenge ahead. Mark would retaliate. He was not the type to back down from a fight. Determination surged through her as she brewed another cup of coffee. She wasn't merely defending her position, she was pioneering a cultural shift within the organization. With that in mind, Emily decided to change her approach. Instead of waiting for Mark to make his next move, she would preemptively strengthen her proposal. Knowledge would be her armor. She filtered through case studies of companies like Google and Zappos, each demonstrating the undeniable correlation between employee satisfaction and company performance. Those companies thrived because they valued their employees beyond just numbers on a balance sheet. She compiled her findings, noting frameworks and potential metrics for measuring success, hard data that would speak to those who, like Mark, could only see growth through a financial lens. Hours slipped away as she buried herself in research, piecing together a multifaceted plan that would address concerns from both sides of the table. Emily was not just driven by a desire to outmaneuver Mark, she was propelled by a wish for something greater within the company, a vision that, as dawn turned to noon, she felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. With the new proposal nearly complete, she headed to the office, her heart racing with a blend of anxiety and eagerness. This time, she would ensure that every argument was fortified, every concern disarmed before it had a chance to manifest. Arriving, she made her way to her desk and greeted Sarah, who sensed the shift in her demeanor. "You seem even more determined today," she remarked, eyebrows raised in encouragement. "I am," Emily responded, the conviction now palpable. "It's time to show Mark that I won't just defend my ideas, I can back them with facts." Just then, Mark strolled in, casually exchanging pleasantries with colleagues, his confidence resonating in every word. The lion was definitely on the prowl. Emily felt a jolt of urgency. Rather than retreating, the moment called for a bold gambit. She resolved to present her revised plan during the weekly team meeting, scheduled later that day. She spent the next few hours preparing her presentation. The stakes felt astronomically high, but each slide was meticulously crafted, illustrating her vision without losing sight of potential costs and measurable outcomes. She sought balance, her ideals woven seamlessly with practicality, ensuring even Mark would have no grounds to dismiss it lightly. With the meeting quickly approaching, Emily's heart raced. This was a substantial moment of vulnerability. She chose to juxtapose lively visuals of employee satisfaction against profits, not merely as a strategy for her defense, but as an inspired call to action. As she stood up to present, her voice resonated with a newfound confidence. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, the kind that thickened the air, demanding attention. When she finished, silence enveloped the room momentarily, showcasing her peers' deep processing of her insights. Mark was the first to speak, his expressions betraying a flicker of surprise. "This is unexpected, Emily." He leaned back, tracing a finger along his chin, his assessment lingering in the air. "But I still question its feasibility. We can't jeopardize the bottom line with unproven strategies." His skepticism hung in the air, and yet there was a shift, an embryonic recognition that their usual back and forth might not play out as he had anticipated. Emily sensed it. This time, uncertainty rippled through Mark, and for the first time, it wasn't just her that had to defend her perspective. It was also him, defending the status quo. In that moment, something profound clicked within her. Regardless of the outcome, she was no longer just fighting for her idea. She was engaging in a larger conversation about the future of their workplace, one where shared values could shape goals. This realization fueled her resolve. She was no longer simply a cog in the machine. She was beginning to become the architect of potential change. Yet, as the discussions continued, Mark's demeanor shifted again, revealing a tightly coiled tension. The prognosis was uncertain, but there it was, an undeniable hint of a challenge. A game of strategy that had escalated into something deeply personal. Emily's heart pounded as she realized this was not merely a professional battle, but a stark confrontation with opposition that would unearth her own strength even further. What would it take to tip the scales in her favor? Would she acquire the support she needed before she could solidify her vision? The stakes had never felt higher. The pulse of the meeting echoed within her. The countdown to an inevitable clash had begun. What was her next move going to be? The very real confrontation loomed, and Emily knew it was time to go beyond mere proposals. She needed to awaken the ambition buried deep within her team. The atmosphere in the room shifted as the discussions deepened, and Emily was surprised to find voices rallying behind her ideas. Some had started to draw connections to their own experiences, anchoring her proposal in a familiar narrative. They echoed her beliefs about the connection between employee well-being and productivity, and Emily felt a glimmer of hope. But Mark's gaze remained unwavering, his skepticism a palpable barrier. Emily, while I appreciate the passion behind your presentation, I still think we need to consider the immediate financial implications, Mark interjected, his tone leaving little room for debate. The warmth of her teammates' support could have lifted her, but with Mark sharpening his focus, she understood she needed to respond strategically. She took a deep breath, collecting her thoughts. This was not just a rebuttal, but an opportunity to sharpen her own clarity and resilience. Mark, I understand the financial concerns are paramount, but what if investing in our team led to reduced turnover costs in the long run? The current market highly values workplaces that prioritize well-being. She paused, attempting to gauge Mark's reaction as she highlighted options that could alleviate his fears. Companies that invest in such cultures often see their return on investment multiply significantly over time. The murmurs of agreement that followed granted her momentum. Emily struck while the iron was hot, her adrenaline fueling every word. Age-old arguments surrounding status and authority seemed to dissolve in the face of a shared vision. However, Mark's expression turned icy, a chilling reminder that the battle was far from over. Let's be realistic. Our shareholders want numbers, not theories, he countered sharply, reclaiming control of the discussion. With a moment's hesitation, Emily decided it was time to confront the real hurdle behind Mark's resistance, his fear of change. Mark, it's understandable to protect your position, but we owe it to ourselves and to our employees to explore new paths. What if we run a pilot with a select team, test our ideas while tracking outcomes closely? It's not a total commitment, but an opportunity to innovate with minimal risk. She caught Mark's eye, holding his gaze. Seeking common ground, she leaned into vulnerability. Even a small step can show that we are serious about wanting to evolve as a company. Are we the kind of organization that dreams big or settles for the status quo? As silence draped the room again, she sensed the tide shifting. Emily had reframed their struggle. It was no longer about her proposal, but rather about the identity of the organization they jeopardized. Would they continue the rigid patterns of the past, or would they dare to embrace a transformative future? Mark's jaw tightened. For a second, it felt as if the walls were closing in. Emily's heart raced. Had she overstepped? But then he sat forward, a flicker of contemplation dancing in his eyes. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it sent a bolt of electricity through her. He was considering it. Before he could respond, Sarah chimed in, "Why not give it a shot? We could set some clear metrics and reassess after 3 months." She was quick to seize the momentum, drawing the room's attention back to Emily's vision. Others nodded in agreement, their supportive expressions emboldening her stance. Feeling buoyed by this newfound collective spirit, Emily watched as Mark wrestled internally. The moment was electric, the tension thick enough to cut. He glanced around the table, weighing the opinions forming on the edges of his authority. Would he yield to the crowd, reshaping the narrative, or dig his heels in deeper? As the meeting drew to a close, Emily remained on high alert, sensing that a breakthrough was tantalizingly close, yet still just out of reach. She had discovered not only her capacity for leadership, but also the ability to galvanize her colleagues' support. Feeling buoyed by this newfound collective spirit, Emily watched as Mark wrestled internally. The moment was electric, the tension thick enough to cut. He glanced around the table, weighing the opinions forming on the edges of his authority. Would he yield to the crowd, reshaping the narrative, or dig his heels in deeper? As the meeting drew to a close, Emily remained on high alert, sensing that a breakthrough was tantalizingly close, yet still just out of reach. She had discovered not only her capacity for leadership, but also the ability to galvanize her colleagues' support. The inner battle she faced was now matched by a collective one against Mark's cautious inclination. With the conversation wrapping up, Mark finally looked at Emily, his features inscrutable. "Let's revisit this after some analysis. I'll consider your proposal." Relief and anticipation washed over her simultaneously. A precarious thread of hope now hung in the air. As everyone filed out, Emily felt a wave of adrenaline coursing through her. But as she stared at Mark's retreating figure, a lingering question remained. Was this a mere stall, or was she truly igniting a lasting change? Determined to uncover the answer, she gripped her laptop tightly, strategizing her next steps. The fight was far from over, but she was ready to dig deeper, to release the full power of her vision on the organization, if only on her terms. And there it was, the looming uncertainty. Would she be able to sustain the momentum, or would Mark find a way to quash it before it even got started? The battle lines had been redrawn, and Emily knew she had to prepare for the next round. But would it be another meeting, or would it be a personal confrontation? The inner clock was ticking. Emily closed her laptop with a sharp click, the sound echoing in the empty conference room, a stark reminder of the high-stakes game she was navigating. The adrenaline rush from the meeting lingered, but now it began to mutate into a blend of anxiety and... Was Mark truly reconsidering his stance, or was this just a temporary setback disguised as a reluctant acceptance? She could sense the fragile balance of support hanging in the air. It was an opportunity that needed careful handling. Walking out of the room, she mulled over her approach. She was learning that leadership was not merely about presenting ideas, but about inspiring trust and confidence. Every interaction could either enforce or demolish her credibility. With each step toward her desk, she mentally prepared herself to consolidate the union she'd built amidst her colleagues. They had reignited her sense of purpose, and she needed to harness that energy without letting it dissipate. The first step was aligning her thoughts with actionable plans. Emily settled back at her desk and grabbed a notepad, her pen poised to translate her swirling ideas into focused strategies. She had to convince Mark with data he respected. Digging into the latest case studies on ROI stemming from employee well-being initiatives could provide the ammunition she needed. If she could reference successful models, it might persuade him to reconsider, perhaps even advocate for her. She had already begun to feel the weight of her aspirations lofting on her shoulders. This wasn't just about the proposal anymore. It was a reflection of her journey within the company, a chance to redefine her role, not just as a contributor, but as a leader. It was daunting, and yet a burning desire to stake her claim in the workplace overwhelmed her doubts. As the days passed, Emily immersed herself in her research. The compelling narratives from other companies illuminated a path fraught with pitfalls, but also opportunities for her to explore. The stories of turnaround strategies, cultures that flourished after investing in their workforce, began to fill her mind. This knowledge was not only empowering, it unveiled hidden corners of her capacity that she had yet to explore. Convinced she needed the support of her colleagues even more than before, she organized informal gatherings, brainstorming sessions that danced beyond conventional presentation formats. In a relaxed environment, ideas flowed freely. Each conversation unveiled insights that not only inspired Emily, but also contributed to a foundational support system, one that emphasized teamwork rather than individual aspirations. Here, she discovered her talent for storytelling, the way she could weave statistical evidence with personal experience into compelling arguments. It became apparent that this could be her defining quality as a leader. But with progress came unexpected challenges. Mark's skepticism simmered as she prepared for the follow-up meeting. His power loomed like a storm cloud overhead, ready to unleash torrents of doubt after the initial glimmer of hope. She sensed the need for a personal confrontation, to address his concerns directly, to perhaps tap into the vulnerability he hid behind an impenetrable wall of skepticism. The clock ticked towards the date of their next scheduled meeting, and the anxiety twisted in her stomach. She thought about the path ahead, one that required her to be... Would she be able to turn the tide in her favor, or would she be washed away in the currents of indecision once again? With her notes in hand and a heart raced by the blend of fear and anticipation, Emily steeled herself for what lay ahead. The battle was brewing, and she could feel the weight of its impending confrontation almost tangibly in the air. As she stepped into the meeting room that day, determination settled in her gut. Whatever came next, she had to confront Mark, not just to challenge his doubts, but to unlock the door to her own potential. Would this be her moment of truth, or would she falter? She would find out soon enough, and her heart pounded with a mix of dread and exhilaration as she took her place at the table, ready to face the repercussions of her boldness. Emily stepped into the boardroom, her resolve hardened in the wake of weeks of preparation and support from her colleagues. This wasn't merely a meeting, it was the culmination of her growth, a moment that demanded every ounce of courage she had cultivated. As she glanced around the table, a mixture of familiar faces looked back at her, some reflecting curiosity, while others exuded skepticism. At the head of the table, Mark sat, his expression a mask of authority, but she sensed that he was equally aware of the stakes involved. "Thank you all for gathering again," she began, her voice steady despite the adrenaline pulsing through her. "Today, I want to revisit our objectives, recognizing that our company's future holds more than mere numbers. It encompasses the welfare of our employees and the larger communities we engage with." With each sentence, she drew strength from her research, the case studies that illuminated her path to transformation. She presented evidence of companies that had embraced social responsibility, demonstrating the distinct connection between employee satisfaction and enhanced performance. Her colleagues nodded, and the murmurs of agreement intensified as she gestured toward the data, visually supporting her points. Mark interjected, his voice cutting through the tension with practiced precision. "Emily, while these anecdotes sound promising, what are the practical implications for our bottom line? The shareholders won't accept vague promises." With a steady breath, Emily met his gaze, determined to channel her fears into focus. "Mark, change begins with a willingness to challenge the status quo. What we need to illustrate is that a robust corporate culture is linked to profitability. I propose we launch a pilot project among a select team to gather measurable outcomes. Think of it as a microcosm for our potential evolution." Silence filled the room as her words hung in the air, the sincerity in her voice creating a palpable tension. Emily was no longer merely defending an idea. She was conversing from a place of ownership, of her aspirations and the collective hopes of her colleagues. Mark leaned back, creasing his brow, but she could see the gears turning in his mind. The battle of wills shifted subtly in her favor as voices from across the table began to express tentative support for her initiative, highlighting their own experiences and friction points within the current structure. "What if we do risk a small investment?" one colleague suggested, emboldened by Emily's candidness. "We have nothing to lose if it doesn't lead to results. But what if it opens new pathways?" There it was. The crack in Mark's facade widened, revealing the pressure he faced. Pursuing revenue was embedded in his role as CEO, but there was a yearning in the room for something greater, more fulfilling, a purpose that resonated with every person present. Emily seized the moment. "Mark, our identities as a company are evolving. Leaning into this change won't just meet reports. It will create an innovation pipeline, positioning us as leaders rather than followers within our market. Isn't that worth exploring?" Mark remained silent, his expression inscrutable, but the murmurs among his peers signaled a shift in momentum that was undeniable. For a fleeting moment, she felt the weight of possibility anchor her desire to persist. With the meeting winding down, Mark finally spoke, his voice tinged with reluctant consideration. "I'll agree to a pilot project, but it must be closely monitored and results shared within a quarter. If we see growth, we can discuss expanding this approach to a larger scale. Emily's heart raced. This was victory, a leap beyond mere survival into collaborative potential. She nodded appreciatively, understanding the significance of his agreement. "Thank you, Mark. This is the opportunity we've been hoping for." As the team departed the boardroom, exhilaration bubbled within her, each colleague exchanging conspiratorial smiles and excited whispers. They had navigated the storm together, and she felt a profound sense of belonging, of purpose forged through adversity. The relationship between her and Mark had shifted. It was no longer one of opposition, but one where respect had begun to take root. Weeks later, Emily stood before her peers again, this time presenting the initial findings from their pilot project. The data was promising, revealing increased engagement and productivity metrics that surpassed their initial projections. As she concluded the presentation, the applause from her colleagues felt like a second heartbeat, the culmination of their collective efforts and her transformation from imposter to leader. In that moment, she realized that she had conquered more than just Mark's skepticism. She had vanquished her own self-doubt. No longer gripped by the need for approval, she had emerged as a voice for authenticity, seamlessly weaving her values into the fabric of the company's aspirations. Each challenge she faced fortified her resolve, reaffirming the belief that success extends beyond profits. It roots itself deep within shared purpose. As the meeting wrapped and her colleagues approached her with congratulations, Emily knew she had accomplished more than she ever envisioned. She was the architect of their future, a vital change agent boldly forging new paths in corporate culture. This was her moment, the achievement she had aspired to, defined not solely by one's standing, but by the ripples of impact made on lives around her. The journey of self-discovery and purpose had only just begun. The boardroom may have been her battleground, but the lessons learned were now tools she would carry forward, ready to evolve her vision with every new challenge that lay ahead. Remember, if you felt inspired by Emily's remarkable journey and want to witness more incredible stories of transformation, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like to fuel the algorithm and make these stories reach those who need them the most. Comment your thoughts and reactions below. And don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion and understand the power of personal growth.